Okay, here we go. We're ready for the next chapter of The Rope in the Jungle. Okay, but before we go on, let's get back to the riddles. Um, I don't remember the last riddle that I had. I have four of them written down here, but I don't remember. Oh, I think I do. Um, Nobody gave me the answer. Um, and I only heard from one person that said they couldn't think of what the answer was. So, listen to this carefully. I am heavy going forward, but backwards I am not. What am I? Okay, figure this out. I am heavy going forward, but backwards I am not. Take the word not, N-O-T, turn it around, and what does it spell? T-O-N, ton. A ton is heavy. So, forward it's a ton, backwards it's not. So now you know the answer to the riddle. All right, there'll be no prize for that one. I'll take the 2021 Mustang convertible and drive it myself. Okay, there's will be a spectacular prize for today's riddle, if anyone can get this. Now, you think about it carefully. You know, kind of write it out, and I'm sure you can come up with the answer. Okay, here it is. What begins with a T, ends with a T, and has T in it? I'll repeat it. What begins with a T, ends with a T, and has a T in it. Okay? Now that should be pretty easy, especially since it's about tea. Okay. We last ended with Trey and Mr. Crabtree, Caleb Crabtree, going down the Kasunkatink River in a kayaku with the witch doctor and one other guy. Okay, they came to a waterfalls and they didn't know how they were going to get over this waterfalls. And the witch doctor said, "No problem. We'll just leave the kayaku here, climb through the jungle. On the other side, there'll be more kayakus for us to take." So they started climbing up and they got into a massive storm. Trey's hand swelled up from touching a tree. They saw a mermaid in the middle of the river, which turned out to be nothing but more than a manatee. And now they're going to reach the other side of the waterfall. Now this chapter isn't scary at all. This one is just kind of more walking and paddling through the jungle. But be always wary of something that may turn up or crawl out from underneath a leaf or drop down from a branch above, because they're in the thickest of the Chiapas jungle. And there's angry natives all around. So they're walking and riding in their cayuco. This chapter is called What the Gods Foretell. Okay, they found 3 beach cayucos, as Don Teo had promised. Chose the lightest one, continued upriver, and that was the day spotted a little village of bamboo and thatch huts ahead of them on the bank they were hugging. "Tanasakik," Trey said eagerly, turning to the Kayake, who merely shrugged his shoulder. No, it wasn't. They discovered when they got there it was the hamlet of Belankan. The villagers indicated with wide sweep of their arms that Tanasaki was Omoshkaluba, a good way further up. Don Teo had never come this far up the river in his life, but evidently his reputation had, for the Bansakalanos, members of the Tlitzo tribe, received him, and even the despised white ones were with the greatest hospitality. Trey and Caleb joined all the male indigenas in quite a feast, or at least partook of everything that didn't look too suspicious. They didn't eat any scorpions. Besides such familiar dishes as tortillas and gullet-burning chilies, they ate, Trey learned eventually, but did not tell Caleb, roasted iguana, boiled owl, pound flowers, and pudding of chimeramoya. The females did not dine, but served the men, and presumably ate later and apart from with the children. After the meal, Caleb joined Don Teo and the 3 elders in a smoke. They all 5 sat down around a large clay pot pierced with several holes. One of the elders threw tobacco and numerous other dried leaves into the pot, set them smoldering with a coal from the cooking fire, then handed a hollow reed to each man. They poked these reeds through the pot's holes, and all together smoked from this communal pipe. Trey suspected that the extra leaves that went into the mix was some sort of mild drug, because when they climbed into the cayuco again, Caleb looked rather glassy-eyed, and the Kayake, a witch doctor, was inclined to be giggly. Also, for the rest of the day, Don Teo's steering was most erratic. They twice suffered collisions with a sandbar, and once with a big and most disgruntled alligator. They hit an alligator. By the way, I'm drinking alligator juice today. The days went on. Occasionally they would see other cayucos, always carrying several indigenas, all paddling intently so that the canoes, whether going upriver or down, whizzed past them with no more than a shouted salute. How do you do, Ben Abuelo? Their portages around cascades and rapids became so frequent that Trey lost count of how many they made, and he was more than ever glad that Don Teo was along to guide them. From the riverside for miles inland, the jungle along the stretch of the Usumacinta was packed by hundreds of blind lagoons, ponds, and lakes, puddles left behind by the river having so often changed its course over the centuries. Had Trey and Caleb been traveling unguided, they would have certainly portaged many times around river obstacles, only to find themselves in a dead-end lake. The Kayako witch doctor unfailingly brought them around to the river again, and finally, gratefully, they came to Tanasanisku, a town of about the same size and dilapidation as Frontera. The town's Kayaku himself, one Tatikmash, came down to the bank to greet them with great formality and humility. Apparently one of the upriver-bound Cayucos had brought word that the great Curandera and Brujo Tio Quinquenquena was touring the river for the first time in history. Not only was a feast laid out for the three visitors, the Carriacou, no witch doctor himself, respectively asked Don Teo if he would join Tenesqui's two residential curanderos in a special performance magic ceremony. The Ancient One agreed readily enough, but said he would have to be put off until the next day, as the rules of the magic demanded that it be done only after fasting, and he had just eaten and drunk his full. All this Trey learned from Dan Teo later, when he requested a personal audience with Keiko Totik Maish, and asked the Ancient One to sit in as interpreter. Don Tokik appeared disdainful of conversing with an outlander, but acceded out of courtesy to Don Teo. Of course, what Trey wanted to ask him was, which way to Zimapan? The reaction of the two Cayucos was surprising and disturbing. Uh-oh. See, Trey just wanted to find out directions, and so he asked the local witch doctor which way to go. They looked at each other and simultaneously, "Zoo!" they said. Don Teo turned to Trey and said in his sparse Spanish that he had thought the two voyagers wanted only to get to Tenascu, and they had no mention of Zayantinatupan. Trey explained, speaking slowly and in simple words, that Zayantinatupan was their ultimate destination, but all they knew of the route was to follow the river to Tenescaqui and then strike into the jungle. Now they had to know which way to Tenescaqui. Don Totik Mash replied at some length to his own language, and Don Teo translated, "You must not ask the way. You must not ask the way. It's Zoo country. No place to go. Bad people. Bad country. The Tenesca Carolanos never go there. I even would not go there." Uh-oh, this is scary. Trey tried to convey some idea of their mission. He succeeded only in puzzling both the Cayucos. "Rope," said Don Teo. "The Zeo have no need of a rope. They only want to be left alone. Do not go there." Beginning to perspire with all the effort, Trey explained that the rope was needed, badly needed, by some white man in Zupapan, and that their getting to him was exceedingly important and urgent. Now I'll get a juice. Oh, that's good. Don Totik again said something with vehemence, and Don Teo translated. It was inconceivable, he said, that there would be any white man in the lands of the Zoo, and when the Zoo would not even admit other indigenas. Ladinas did sometimes invade the jungles, he went on, and at least they come out as far as the Tenesci here. That was what worried Karake Totik Mash, and that was why Don Totik had asked for the magical ceremony. A party of Ladino Mexicans had come here not long ago and found somewhere beyond the jungle to the east a tremendous forest of valuable chacti trees. Don Totik was worried that they would return to the harvest, that mahogany, and overswarm his domain. He had asked Don Teo to look into the future and divine what was in store for the Teneski, and the Tenaskakininos. I don't know yet, the Ancient One concluded. Maybe Ladinos come here again, but never to Zoo Country. No outlander ever goes to Zoo Country. We got to go. Just tell me the way. Just point, said Trey. Don Teo said, with some heat, that no one knew the way. Never having been there, how could they? All we could say is that the zoo ruled over a vast piece of jungle. No one knew its exact extent. Far from the other western side of the Usumacinta, Trey thanked him for that much, got up, and left Don Totik's hut. Hearing the two Karakis begin to chatter excitedly behind him, he sought out Mr. Crabtree, who was sauntering, very bored, up and down the muddy streets, and recounted the frustrating episode. Let's look at the map, suggested Caleb. Some honey spray. Honey spray. Good. Well, said Trey, as he bent over it beside the Cayuco. The Karakais say that it's on the other side of this river. That figures, if we go inland just a few miles on this side, we're in Guatemala. And Baltazar said it was 90 miles or more. Right. Do you have a piece of string, sir? Caleb did. His pockets were full of bits of string and cord with which he sometimes amused himself, casting and opening various intricate knots. Trey was so sure to invent the one that should be known forever more as the Caleb Crabtree knot. Trey laid the string across the kilometer scale at the bottom of the map, and with the knife cut off at a piece corresponding to 150 kilometers. Then he reached into the cooking brazier and took out a cold chip of charcoal. Now, he said, bending over the map again, as near as I could place it, Tenaskew is right here on the river. He put one end of the string on that spot and held it firm with his thumb. He took the other end of the string with a stump of charcoal in his hand. He swung the end of the part of charcoal roughly from north to south, and the charcoal marked a black arc on the paper. Okay, the Amapan is somewhere along that line, he said with satisfaction, or not too many miles one side of the other. Aye, said Caleb, but that line covers a lot of territory. Baltazar left one other clue. Remember when he was telling how he had come to meet us? He said he hacked his way northwest from Zuyampan to San Cristobal, and that's where he got him a horse. So, Mr. Crabtree, somewhere southeast of San Cristobal. It's got to be, said Trey. He drew a finger southeast along the map, from the dot indicating San Cristobal de las Casas and the black charcoal arc. Somewhere about there. Southwest of here, then. But we've still got one whale of a margin for error. Somewhere about there. But certainly, said Trey, the closer we get to it, the likelier we are to run into some native who can give us clearer directions. That's so. Very well, then. I'm game. Are you, lad? Yes, sir. In the morning. First thing in the morning. As it turned out, though, They didn't get set out exactly first thing. The next morning, because Don Teo came down to the Cayuco where they were carefully repacking their duffels and courteously invited them to watch his ceremonial look into the future. Who knows, he said, it might even include them, and would translate all the goings on when they were concluded. With that, Don Trail reached into the cayuca and scrabbled around and found 3 small clay pots, which Trey had never thought to ask about and long ago forgotten. The God pots, Don Trail said reverently. They followed him through the town to the long hut, the God house. No more than a roof of thatch propped on poles that opened on all sides. The women and girls of Tanuski had all been shooed away, out of sight, sound, and ritual. All the men of the town were seated in a semicircle on the ground before the hut. Trey and Caleb sat on the fringe of the crowd, while Don Teo joined the 2 other curanderos, already sitting cross-legged under the thatch. The Ancient One set a gold god pot in front of each of the 3 men. The pots, Trey now remembered, already contained some kind of substance, doubtless a secret mixture known only to Don Teo. The 3 plucked handfuls of straw from the ground, fallen from the thatch, and dropped into these pots. A young boy brought a glowing coal from somewhere, and the 3 men lit their pots. At the first straw blazed up brightly, with an oddly deep red from purple flame that was easily visible from the bright daylight. Then the substance already in the pots began to smolder. The flames died, and a volume of purplish smoke poured from the pots, quite obscuring the 3 witch doctors. Don Teo began a chant, pausing at intervals for the 2 junior curanderos to repeat after him. The smoke billowed up under the thatch and escaped from under the eaves to float out over the watching crowd. Trey sniffed. Its odor was of several mingled smells, some pleasant, some not. And he could identify at least the pungent perfume of copal, the rosin of palm, or sweet gum tree. A little more alligator juice. Just that one whiff made Trey feel dizzy. Nothing was happening but the chanting. No demons or other interesting things seemed likely to be put in an appearance. So Trey withdrew to some distance where he could breathe fresh air. Finally, the God Pot ceremony was over, and the 3 men emerged, staggering slightly with an opaque, faraway look in their eyes to make their report. Karako Taki Mash stood up from the crowd of spectators and went to meet them. The other village men and Trey gathered about. Don Teo did the talking and kindly stopped at intervals to turn to Trey and translate. Normally this might have offended or angered the crowd, but they respected Teo Kinkan too much to object. The visiting witch doctor was pleased to report that he and the 2 resident witch doctors had intended and indeed succeeded in peering some way into the future. He was less pleased to report that the future did not look too good. As Kayake Toka Mash had feared, the Ladinos were even now making plans to exploit the mahogany forests. It would be some time yet, but eventually Tenascacu would be dominated by Ladino Mexicanos. and the native Tenascaquinos would be the Ladinos' hired hands working for wages. Cries of Mayuk, Mayuk, Mayuk from the crowd. Never, no such things. Yes, they would, the witch doctor repeated, because Beyuale, there would be no more hunting or corn planting. The outlanders would frighten away all the game and trample all the land. A roar of indignation went up as it subsided into a clamorous chatter of anxious conversation. Don Teo turned to face Trey squarely. I see you also in time's coming. Trey wasn't exactly sure he wanted to hear about it. I see. Rope in the jungle. You spoke a truth. I see. Rope. Make God speak. Make earth tremble. Make great fire. Make great death. How could a simple rope all but Don Teo waved away the interpretation? Overall, he said, I see looming figure over you. Overall, figure of the ghost of Zatapi. Oh no. This ends the chapter. The next chapter is called The Zatapi. We already heard of its ghost, so next we're going to read about the ghost. So buckle up, folks. It's coming next time. All right, let's put a marker in there. All right, don't forget about the riddle.